Welcome to episode 4 of our CPO conversation series. This week, we're joined by Simon Geale, CPO at Proxima. Simon, great to talk.
Yeah, nice to see you, Rich. Nice to see you again. Thanks for the invite.
First question, I guess this is inspired by a Tom Mills post from this week. Tell me about some of the early jobs that aren't on your CV, but where you learnt some of your important life lessons.
Oh goodness. Right. So, what were my first jobs? I worked as a lifeguard. I worked for quite a long period of time. I handed out. Oh my goodness, this is going to date me, but I spent time as like handing out the original internet CDs for
Oh,
AOL.
wow.
I did
Brilliant.
that for a summer. I've worked in bars. I've worked in golf clubs. I was a DJ back at a time when they used to use plastic. Um, I had short stints in and around doing things with music. So I did all sorts of things really before sort of falling into procurement. Um, yeah, and what did they teach me? I got no idea. I think the overarching thing that they taught me was that at an early age, when you're able to go out, work, earn money, do lots of different things. I cleaned offices, I cleaned swimming pools,
Mm.
um, just go and do stuff.
Yeah. No one talks about the people that used to go around handing out CDs for the ISPs. You know, that was one of the first jobs to get automated, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably because of my performance stats, no doubt. They probably saw this enormous business case. I actually had a funny one because I worked at my patch was Gatwick Airport.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and the thing that struck me was why would anybody possibly want to take a sort of internet CD on holiday with them? Or when they've just got back. I mean, no one's going to care. But mysteriously, I got the highest performing stats. So I'm not going to tell you how, but we'll leave that one, I think.
And how did you go from those early jobs and into procurement?
Well, the long form story is that I failed my A levels. I went back and repeated my A levels, did all right, got offered a place in university, decided I was going to not go to university and try and become a professional DJ. Eventually went to university, didn't really enjoy the academia side of it. Couldn't get a job at the end. I was on the milk round. I heard Andrew Newman talking about the milk
Mm.
round. I was on the milk round, couldn't get a job, and then I found a course in the newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, on a Wednesday had a job section, and it was a master's course in France called the MAE, which was all about procurement supply chain. And I applied for it. I got onto it, and I think there was 17 of us. And at the end of that course, I had a few offers, which I ended up blowing all of them. Worked in a golf club, and ended up moving to the Netherlands to work for Philips in procurement.
Okay.
And so that's sort of the long form story of how it happened. So a bit by accident, but I sort of found my mojo somewhere along that process.
And you had to part your ambitions to become a superstar DJ.
I never said, just to clarify, Rich, I never said superstar DJ. I just said DJ. And it's a good thing that I parked those ambitions because, I think of all the things you need to be a DJ, I probably just lacked one or two, like talent maybe. But there you go.
There's actually I talked to a lot of procurement leaders, and there's a lot of procurement leaders who are into their music. Actually, there's maybe a case to get a procurement band together at some point.
Yeah, and if you do, I would strongly advise you not to have me in it.
Thanks for the advice.
That's all right.
Uh, so you're one of the very few CPOs who's responsible for marketing in their role, and you also work very closely with salespeople. I guess you end up with a bit of a split personality there. What do you take? I guess you see both sides of the coin. Are procurement and sales that different? What can procurement do to help salespeople out?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first part of your point there, yeah, I'm sort of
Mm.
CPO in name, but what CPO means for us, because we're essentially a procurement company, a consultancy that delivers procurement to lots of organisations. We don't actually buy many things for ourselves, so it'd be a pretty dull job to be a traditional CPO for Proxima. But I'm responsible for our products and services, so what we say we're going to do, or what we say we do,
Yeah.
for our sort of marketing, messaging, market relations, CPO advisory, that sort of thing. So Really, it's about how we project ourselves externally. And of course, that means that I do day-to-day work with a lot of other vendors. So, a lot of sales and business development on their side, business sales and business development on our side. I've spent a long time working with salespeople, probably 10, 15 years, but all under the guise of procurement. So it's a bit
Mm.
strange. And I think my fundamental takeaway would probably be that we're not that different, or we shouldn't be that different.
Yeah.
But we sort of mismatch each other. So, the classic example is, well, a couple of classic examples. Procurement people will often complain that suppliers don't come to them with innovation.
Yeah.
The suppliers want to innovate, but they feel that procurement, or process at least, will constrain them in delivering that innovation.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental mismatch there. I think another is that salespeople will prepare to the nth degree to go and have a meeting or to go after a prospect. They will put huge amounts of efforts into thinking about the solution, the story, the people, and procurement people, generally speaking, don't do the same.
Yeah.
They approach it in a much more transactional way, probably because of time and available data and insight. Salespeople generally invest a huge amount of effort in investing to try to sell, I
Yeah.
think. And it can be seen as a bit of a dark art by procurement people, but I think when I moved into sales briefly, I couldn't sell, by the way. I'm quite good at helping salespeople, but I was rubbish at selling. It didn't really motivate me. I struggled. I thought it was a dark art. I thought
Mm.
all salespeople were car salesmen, trying to trick you. And you got to get out of that mindset. What you got to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
the mindset is you got a problem, I got a solution. Let's figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, I see that, and I see it's the same. You get good procurement people, you get bad procurement people, you get good salespeople, you get bad salespeople, and you get some salespeople. They literally just want to earn their commission, and they want to sell you what they're going to sell you, and they want you to buy it, and they want to buy you to buy it by a certain date, and it's quite a forced process. In the same way that a procurement person might just want to strip savings out of a particular requirement. I think the thing where you know when you've met a good salesperson when at the end of it you feel like they've sort of facilitated you through the process. You've there's collaboration, there's sort of mutual value creation, and similarly from procurement, I think there's that space in the middle that we can both work and create something beautiful.
Yeah, I quite like being sold to. I quite
Mm.
like. I'm a bit weird because I quite like those sort of 20 or 30 automated emails that I get every day.
You must be the only person.
Well, do you know what I like to do? And I advise you to do this. Okay, so it's basic sequencing in a CRM. So
Mm.
they'll send you one. There'll be maybe 3 to 4.
Yeah.
And the first one will do an intro. The second one will offer you something. The third one will say something a bit provocative to try and get your
Yeah.
attention. So it's a fairly standard thing, but just let them run.
Mm.
Don't click unsubscribe until you get near the end, because you can just sort of see the tactics that they use. And in
Yeah.
my role, you might be able to learn something. But in the same way that I know a lot of people have got a downer on something like Crowdsheets, but let's just talk about profiling for a second. In the same way that you might profile suppliers, salespeople will profile you,
Yeah.
how important you are, and that's where those two things come together. Is really where the magic happens, as you say. And I think you just have to accept that sometimes you're going to meet the guy who wants to screw you down, and sometimes you're
Mm.
going to meet the guy or the girl or whomever who wants to collaborate with you.
Yeah.
That's just life. And so, where do you focus your efforts?
In your job, you get to talk to many CPOs. What's the biggest issue that they're facing right now?
Well, the biggest issue that they're facing right now is that it's everything everywhere all at once,
Mm.
which is a really nice phrase that I've shamelessly stolen from someone that I thought it was original, but apparently it's a book title or something like that. And so I distilled this the other day. Actually, I was presenting at a conference, and I came up with, I think there were 8 sort of themes. And the first was like purpose and profit. So what's the
Mm.
balance there? We all want to be more purposeful, but there's this challenge with being profitable at the moment. How do we address that? The second was value chain planning. And so this concept of understanding the customer better to drive greater agility and connect that up to supply chains. Risk and resilience, experiential. That's super important at the moment.
Mm.
Talent, culture, and then sort of agility and growth. So those are like the 6 things that the business was almost asking CPOs to cope with. But then the big elephant in the room, cost,
Yeah.
and then transformation. And I use the word transformation slightly under duress, because I'm one of those people that flips between I accept the word and I don't like the word. I believe it's evolution, transformation. So, but
Yeah.
I've got myself into a space where I just think life's too short to worry about labels sometimes.
Yeah. 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 You hear arguments both ways, don't you? And some organizations do need quite a transformation, but it's quite a disruptive process. And actually, there's just this continuous change that we all need to be going through in the marketplace of the 2020s.
I think that's right. I think the pace of change is such now that every organization is navigating forward in a way which is just faster than it's been before. I don't think it's necessarily different to how it's been before. I think change is a constant, but perhaps it's just faster and we're always on and there's more noise around us. But I think it's a bit unfashionable to say it, but right now we're facing into a recession. And I think the big challenge facing CPOs or businesses is we've got all these priorities at the same time as everyone else, and we've only got a finite amount of cash. So where
Yeah.
are we going to get the cash to do it from? And that doesn't mean that we go in and slash costs and blah blah blah. I mean, we do some of that because that's cutting back on discretionary spend is important. But what it means is we understand how our money works for us, whether our money's there to deliver on our purpose ambitions, our profit, reduce risk, encourage growth, and we figure out how to optimize what we spend around that and do it smarter and better. So I think is this, anyone who's sat there chipping away is failing, but the people who are either innovating their offerings or structurally transforming their cost base are the ones who are winning, or doing better. And I think that's what a lot of the conversations come back to that. If I'm going to do this, how do I fund it? How do I do it? Well, you can do it by doing that. Be bolder, do bigger things. Now's a time when I think procurement has a wonderful opportunity to remind the organization that it is the champions of the sort of commercial architects of the business, be that sort of growth or cost, but also remind them that it's the bigger and bolder things that make the difference, not just the same old things.
Yeah, the challenge is, you mentioned the recession word, and we are facing into it. The danger is that the CFO takes down the playbook, which is right. Procurement, go and get 10%, 20% out of the supply base. Go back to those sort of old cost-cutting tactics that we've been through many times in the past. How do we get from that to where what you mentioned there, the sort of the more commercial architecture procurement that we see in the future?
Well, I think that's right. Yeah, I think we have a little presentation on this, which is around sort of recession ready and blah blah blah. And there's this one category we call them zombies, where we said you just sort of march forward like nothing's happening and do the same old thing. The reality is that that is going to make you struggle. You're not going to get the results that you want to achieve. But if you look at where you spend your money, a proportion of that, let's sort of get it out of the way and admit it. Markets move. There will be things where you're overpaying. There will be things where you're spending money that you don't need to, and you shouldn't, right? And it might be absolutely right that there's an element of old school tactics or stopping spend and blah blah blah, and that's just life. Now, whether you should focus your efforts there when there's a bigger prize on offer, I think is debatable, and it might depend on the influence you have in the organization. But I think fundamentally you have to get down to the brass tacks of what's the business trying to achieve? What does every pound or dollar or euro that we spend do in pursuit of that achievement? And therefore, how can we spend smarter? And where can we do things differently? Really, really make the change. And so for me, I always prefer the term optimization or cost transformation and cost optimization to cost reduction. Yeah. But I concede that cost reduction forms a part of that.
Yeah. Tell me a bit more about Proxima. So what are you guys working on at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've heard of Proxima, great, because that's my job. If you haven't heard of Proxima, shame on you. Please don't tell anyone. Just pretend you have. So we're about, let me just give you the potted history. We're about 25 years old. We're a procurement consultancy that was founded in London and now operates across the sort of EU and the US. We work mainly with, let's say, sort of large, complex businesses or businesses that aim to be large and complex and essentially help them solve their procurement challenges, I guess. We have a fundamental belief that, suppliers are there to enable and power businesses forward. And we work with probably about 20% of the FTSE 100, a few Fortune 20s and quite a lot of Fortune 500s. So we're basically out there trying to, well, we call it purposeful and profitable change. But I guess we're just out there trying to help people either optimize their costs, transform their own capability, or sort of deliver sustainable impact.
Great. And why should a listener think about joining Proxima?
My aim is that we can offer people one of the most exciting careers in procurement. So in consultancy, well, consultancy is not for everyone, firstly, but what is good about consultancy is that you can work across a broad range of different types of companies in different types of industries at a faster rate than you could sort of, well, ordinarily, perhaps if you were sort of out forging your own career path in different types of institutions. And I think that's changing a little bit as the gig economy, or as general companies procurement functions become more like consultants. But in essence, I'd say there's a group of like-minded people who do what you do, want to help each other, want to grow something special, and come and be a part of that. Come and drive change in some of the world's biggest companies. Come and work with a team of people who want to help you and see you excel.
You mentioned there that consultancy is obviously not for everyone. Are there any particular skills that you look for in procurement people that are maybe slightly different to procurement people? Or I suppose, and then the second part of the question is, and what skills do you think we need more of in procurement?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different in terms of, so if you put us up against, let's say, a general consultancy like the Big Four, for instance, we specialize in procurement. So we value people who know about procurement and supply chain. So, I remember joining one of the Big Four as a experienced hire. So someone who'd already had experience in buying or category experience in my case. And I felt a little bit out of place. I felt like, almost I was there for what I knew and nothing else. In our world, we're working side by side with businesses, with procurement teams, with stakeholders. And so we need to have those people who know what they're talking about. So we value procurement expertise, firstly, supply chain expertise, but we also value consulting expertise, because we think that, procurement teams, a lot of the challenges facing procurement now as it wants to move up the value chain, or as it wants to do more exciting and interesting stuff, comes from, how to work with people, how to open things up, how to facilitate collaboration, how to tell stories, how to, use data. So a lot of those things that are sort of core consulting skills. And so I think the combination of the two is quite powerful.
What do you think procurement needs to change in order to reach its potential?
That's a really interesting question. Okay, so if we're going to answer that, I think first of all, you have to unpack what is the potential for procurement. I've got a couple of lenses on this. So the first one was that about 5 or 6 years ago, we developed a model which sort of looked back at where we'd come from as sort of, centralized buying teams through sort of category management, business partnering. And it ended up with what we call network partnering, which essentially, I guess, means managing supplier ecosystems, helping the business to develop and improve products, services, etc. So really sort of implanting itself into the business and unpacking or unleashing the power of suppliers and sort of powering the business forward. And I think right now that probably still is the potential of procurement. Really sort of help the business drive its strategy in a broader way than it already does today. And when we developed that model, we sort of looked back and we said, well, hang on a minute. Not everything the business spends money on or buys is, in pursuit of this revenue or agility or et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it is about reducing cost or driving productivity or driving standardization. And so I thought, well, is procurement really one function? And we did like a 4-box model because we're consultants and I love 4-box models. So don't hate me for that. I came up with the concept, or we came up with the concept rather, that actually maybe it was 3 functions. So on the axes, we had cost or return, so cost or revenue, and then we had standardization or agility, a very simplified model. And we said, well, if you're focused predominantly on cost and standardization, really that's a technology function, right? You can automate all of that. It's about driving speed, reliability, process, etc. So to me, that sounds like you're just pushing, really, forget about the products and services, you're pushing data around. So why not treat that like a technology function? Why not? At the top end, when you're focused on growth and agility or something like that, whatever it is, you're looking to innovate, you're looking for creativity, you're looking to think about what's next, harness the power of internal and external brains. We thought, well, that's an innovation function or a growth function, and that's very different to the technology function.
Yeah.
And in the middle, you've probably got a hodgepodge of stuff, but really the core sort of procurement supply chain stuff that we do today, and some of which can be automated, but whereas the technology function is probably digitally delivered, perhaps that middle bit's still just sort of digitally enabled, and the other bit's sort of digitally informed. And so we came up with this concept that actually a procurement function is three functions. It's not one. And if you're going to excel or reach your potential, you have to figure out which one of those your organization needs right now, or wants right now. Which one do they value, and go and build it, and go and recruit to do that. If you try and build a digital function in a organization that manages creativity, you're not going to realize your potential. As smart an idea as it is, you go and try and take creativity into a company that is not interested in creativity from procurement, you're just going to bash your head and have a very unfulfilling experience. And so I think it's, to make a long answer, to get to the end of a long answer, I think it's about understanding what your business values, understanding how to navigate the players within that, and then building a function that's calibrated to excel in that environment.
That's a great answer, actually. And I've seen that coming from an IT procurement background, trying to run an RFP process in a high growth, innovative organization, it's almost impossible because things are changing so quickly, and you can't hold down a spec. But even if you could do it in 3 months, things would have changed in that time. So then you have to come up with other strategies to actually deliver the right value and deliver the right option for that organization, and work in a more agile way. Definitely.
I think that's right. I mean, that's a really good example. And there's a slight segue, but about 10 years ago, in Proxima, we've got a history of doing some really innovative stuff, probably sometime ahead of the curve, and therefore not really profiting from it. But something we did 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, is we figured out that we could kind of, just by asking a few questions, we could automate the creation of RFPs.
Right.
By having all this sort of data in the background. So a bit like sort of what a globality might do today, but let's just clarify, nowhere near as nowhere near that sort of level of professionalism. Let's get that on the table. So we built this thing, and we pushed it live, and we looked at the usage figures after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We thought, why aren't the figures higher? And we realized that a lot of the work that we were doing wasn't running RFPs. It was that sort of commercial architecting, value engineering, looking at solutions rather than commoditizing problems. And that's where I think procurement, or a lot of procurement functions, are sort of getting to now, isn't it? It's the concept that there's a fundamental difference between buying or selling a commodity and a solution.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do both on the sales side and on the procurement side is we walk in thinking we're buying a commodity, and the other person thinks they're selling a solution.
Yeah.
And there can be a big mismatch there. And so I think when you're looking at your customers, you have to consider, what do they really value here, and bring that into your decision process. Not just about the suppliers that you choose, but how you go about running that process.
What do you believe about procurement that very few people agree with you on?
I'll put my marketeer hat on for a second here. Or actually, I think psychologists say that there's 5 different personality types, and I think marketeers generally work on 7. But I read a book once where someone said there's about 1,000. So by definition, there's probably nothing I believe that no one else doesn't believe. But I do believe a lot of wacky things. So let me sort of throw a few at you. I believe very early in best of breed. I currently believe that the best of breed market is at risk of becoming a bit of a parody of itself and eating itself. I think.
Yeah.
I believe, as I said earlier, that we should be proud of our role as cost architects. I think, we need to define, cost is part of a broader set of value, but I think we need to own that. I think, best in class, I've said, doesn't exist. It's organizationally different. And I believe that the key to high performance is Mick Jagger. There you go. That's the one. I'm landing on that. No one else will believe that. No one else is going to believe that. Okay, so that's my one. That's my one.
In a procurement context, or just in life in general?
Well, yeah. So it was a long ambition of mine to go and see the Rolling Stones, and we went when my wife was pregnant with our first child, so she drove, and we got there early. It was 10 deep at the bar, and I'm ashamed to say I don't remember any of it. I think it was quite good, but it was so expensive. I've never been back. But however, that's a digression. I can't read books, right? I'm just certainly academic books, textbooks, stuff like that. I love stories, and I can read stories, but I really struggle with books. And
Right.
one day, it's just right behind me actually. Our sales director came in with the Challenger sale, and I started to read the Challenger sale, and I couldn't read it. I don't know what it is. I'm not wired that way. And so instead, I went online and I started looking at Challenger thinking. And the concept of Challenger thinking is basically that you use your constraints as the power to sort of drive you forward. So,
Okay.
like Richard Branson, for instance,
Mm.
starts an airline without owning a plane. What's the biggest constraint in starting an airline? I don't have an airplane. He got around it, Challenger thinking.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I came across a guy called Mark Barden doing a presentation, and he was working for a consultancy, I think called eatthebigfish.com. So I'm going to credit him with it. And he
Mm.
comes on stage and he does a Mick Jagger impersonation, which I might have copied in a presentation I did sort of 10 years ago. And the concept is that Mick Jagger wants to be the world's best rock and roll frontman.
Mm.
But at the time, he's performing in pubs and clubs, and they have a tiny stage. And so, how do you develop a style which is memorable,
Mm.
interesting, but you haven't got much space? And so he comes up with I have no idea if this is true, but he comes up with a style of movement and dancing which is unique to him. He
Yeah.
uses his constraint to his advantage. And I think that in business, in procurement, there's lots of reasons why we can't do things, lots of constraints facing us.
Yeah.
And it's our ability to challenge and think around it and think we can if that ultimately transforms you from being someone who sits there saying, well, we can't do it because into, yeah, we can do this if we do it like this. And if
Yeah.
we're going to move up the value chain, I think we should all be a bit more like Mick Jagger.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I think that's something that we've seen is the fact that there's so much constraint around resources. There's never enough resource to do everything you want to do in procurement. So you've got to be smarter about how you attack that, and whether that's through consultancy, through outsourcing, through technology. There's things that you can do to make sure you're focused on the activity that's actually driving value for your organization.
I think that's right, Rich. And I think I wrote an article on it once, and I did a couple of presentations on it, and I really enjoyed it. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done in that context because I learned so much.
Mm.
I think I used the example in the article. I'm not sure if it was I want to become a CPO and I want to run a marathon, and
Yeah.
two sort of things. And running a marathon. Let's say I don't know, you're a little bit overweight, you've got dodgy knees, and you haven't run for a while, and you sit there on your sofa thinking, well, I'm never going to run a marathon. It's too hard. I can't do it. The alternative approach is to stand there and go, well, I can if.
Yeah.
Break it out, break it down, make the steps easy. And I think it's a really empowering thing to do if you have a big ambition.
Yeah, totally. Although you're not into your books, which book has changed your thinking about procurement the most?
I used to love to read. But as I said, I really struggle with reading anything technical, which means that to my
Mm.
left, I've got not only the Challenger sale, but I've got the Intelligence Trap, I've got Hooked, I've got Bounce, Biology, Polish for Dummies. There you go. All sorts of things. And I've probably not got through more than a chapter on any of them. And in actual fact, I probably hadn't finished a book in years until I went on holiday recently when I went through 5.
Wow.
But none of them were business books. But in and amongst those books, I've got 2 that I read a long, long time ago. One of them is called Breaking the Mold by Peter Hunter.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, and it's all about how you can bring people together to solve challenges, basically.
Right.
So it ties into what I've just said. And the other one, which really is a story, but it's quite enjoyable, you could probably finish it in an afternoon, is Maverick by Ricardo Semler.
Okay.
And that's all about a guy who he's in Brazil, he takes over his father's business, and essentially it's all about how can you empower people and essentially make yourself redundant and go and do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Mm.
And what I liked about that, or what I really took away from that, was there's a huge amount of power in or a huge amount of enjoyment, and you get the best out of people when you empower them and you try and create a safe space for them to try things, get the occasional thing wrong,
Yeah.
but ultimately give them the eureka moment.
Mm.
And sometimes you know the idea, but if you can give them the eureka moment, you can help them get there, and you help
Mm.
them and inspire them. And I think those two books did that. I mean, I do an awful lot of reading, and I
Mm.
listen to an awful lot of people because I have to for my job. And I probably take things in like that now. I probably take in more concepts and ideas and sound bites than I necessarily do sort of textbooks. But,
If people want to get hold of you, where's the best place?
well, I mean, the obvious one is on LinkedIn. So yeah, if you want to get hold of me, do connect. And I love meeting new people. I think one of the most interesting thing is to listen to other people, even though I've just made you listen to me for half an hour. Yeah, please get in touch and let's build our networks.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Good to talk to you.
Massive pleasure, Rich. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Do like and share from your favourite platform. And if you have any suggestions for future guests or feedback, drop me a LinkedIn message at Rich Sains. Join us next time for another procurement conversation.